The Saga of ShaHaNon, Book 2, Emperors and Exiles. Chapter 4, Whispers of Conflict. Orion couldn't relax, and he needed to find a way to distract himself from all the things in his mind. It had not been his plan, but there was a fantastic sign, and a young man selling tickets to some great show with some famous singer that Orion had never heard of. He went ahead and bought a balcony seat for two. Maybe it was time for him to go to a show, to do something different than what had become normal for him. He knew, as he bought the tickets from the young man, that he would need to make certain they fit in. The last thing he wanted was to be recognized. They had to show up as wealthy men, not as fathers James and Orion. He would need to go shopping. He cut for the market, grateful for the distraction. It would give him something else to think about for a few hours at least. He knew what Jamie had packed and what the man owned, and he had to admit that nothing would work in the company they were about to be a part of. He had to stop and think. What size was his partner? Had he gained weight? Had he lost muscle? The fit of one's clothes was important in the circles of wealth. He sighed and took it on as a challenge. He would need to find the right size and make it all look tailored. He paused for a moment to thank God for something stupid and meaningless to think of, to distract him from the encroaching storm on his mind. The tickets that Orion had bought were for the Imperial Theater, so it would work for Jamie's desire to see and touch something of the upper classes. Orion was certain that was not what Jamie had in mind, but if Jamie wanted something else, then he could find another show later. This just happened to present itself. Tickets in hand and clothes sent ahead to the inn, Orion had one more stop to make before he got ready himself. He found a jeweler to pick out a set of prayer beads for Jamie. He knew Jamie had broken his some time ago and simply never had time or money to get a new set. After looking through endless numbers of them, he found exactly what he had hoped to find. They were moonstones on a chain of elven silver. On the gold star, etched with delicate silver writing, were the names of the 12 angels of Pert. It was stunning, it was expensive, and it was powerful. As he bought it and filled out the paperwork for it, signing his name to the bill as his own, Orion Valrine Hennon, the shop owner, looked up at him almost in shock.
"Your father Orion?"
the man asked in awe.
"Most days,"
Orion muttered, pressing his thumb into the paperwork, burning his thumbprint into it. All registered wizards had to do that for all banknotes.
"I thought you had a set of gold beads,"
the man said.
"I do,"
Orion said. He didn't think it needed to be known that he had lost them somewhere along the road 10 years ago. For 60 and some years, he had carried those beads and then just gone.
"These are for Jamie,"
he added.
"I am honored to know into whose great hands they will go,"
the shop owner said with a bow of his head.
"Why are you here? Roston is a long way from Norwood's dark border."
"Jamie is teaching a few classes. We won't be in the city long."
Orion didn't point out that they no longer patrolled the northern border, but were the bishops of Kos and had been for years.
"Might I have a blessing against the dark things that hunt the souls of men?"
the man asked carefully, almost fearfully for such a thing. It was a good request, nothing like a blessing for wealth or good luck like so many wished. Orion reached out his hand and set it softly on the top of the man's bowed head. He closed his eyes and for a moment let himself just breathe. Then he whispered softly to heaven to bless the man, to guide his steps, and to protect him from dark things. As his final breath of the word released, Orion felt it, a darkness, something that had marked the man, watched and hunted him. It was a flash of something, but even as Orion saw it, the power of his blessing seemed to jolt through him like a shock of energy. Whatever it was that had marked the man was shattered by the power of Orion's priesthood. It startled Orion enough that his hand jerked away, but the blessing was done. More often than not, the power of a priest was debatable. Sometimes things shifted and moved for it, but Orion had felt his faith crumble into mud over the years. But this burst of energy was a powerful way to remind him that he was still a priest, and Armand was still the angel of Pert. The shopkeeper took a shuddering, gasping breath and began to cry. Orion took his package, uncertain what to say, and left the man there to feel what it was to be blessed and free of the dark thing that had been after his soul. Once Orion got back to the inn, he bathed, washing with finer soaps and shampoos than anything available in Kos or on the roads of a patrol. He dressed in the new clothes and sat with a glass of wine, thinking about what had happened with the jeweler. He was still sitting there thinking with the same glass of wine when Jamie entered the room.
Wow, what's this for?
Jamie asked of Orion's altered appearance.
You even shaved.
Go get bathed and dressed.
Orion said vaguely, gesturing to the new clothes on Jamie's bed. Jamie went to do as told, while Orion kept coming back to the flash of darkness he had seen. His mind wanted to make it into a face, and yet it was just out of his mind's eye, as if he was scanning something with a shield up, so he couldn't quite make it out. Jamie emerged looking like a noble prince in his fine clothes and long curls. He held the beads in his hands and looked up at Orion, almost afraid to ask.
Are these for me?
He asked.
I put them on your clothes, didn't I?
Orion asked, getting up.
Yes, Jamie, those are for you. Yours broke months ago.
How did you know that?
I found several of the beads on the office floor. We do live in the same space, you know.
I was having a bad day,
Jamie said uneasily.
I know you like moonstones, so...
Orion shrugged.
Just put them on and let's go.
Jamie strung them through his belt in the manner of a ranking priest who was off duty. They left the inn for the carriage that had been ordered and was waiting in the street. The footman opened the door and offered a hand to help them in. Taking a seat, Jamie watched out the window as the carriage moved forward. It rapidly brought them up into the higher and wealthier part of the city. The crowds were left behind for wider streets with only a few carriages. On the sidewalks were servants at tasks and various errands, but little else. All Orion could see were the alterations to the ancient city. Buildings as old as Pert itself stood here and should have been honored, but they were defaced with the styles of the empire of the last few thousand years. He sighed and refused to look at the tarnishing mark of current construction and disregard. They came to the restaurant that was said to be the best in Broston. The carriage door was opened to a landing platform, with a number of elegant steps down to the main yard. The walkway to the doors was lit with tall lampposts, with buckets of flowers at the foot of each one. Small parks on either side of the walkway were beautifully maintained, and somewhere, although they couldn't see it, they could hear a fountain. The building itself looked to be a small palace, and the inside proved it. The place was called the King's Hall and was well named. Waiters were like guards in uniforms, the floors polished marble, the walls layered in gold, showing scenes of a fantasy world of beautiful naked people working in the fields and vineyards of Pert. Above it all, the ceiling soared up 100 feet to a barrel dome down the length of the main room. The entire ceiling was covered in a single solid mirror that reflected the room and light back, making it all seem that much larger and wealthier. They were given a table for two, with wine already set out for them. The meal came in courses: seafoods, fresh salads that tended to be as much flower petals as leaves, pastas, rices from as far away as Tuss, dwarven breads, and all of it leading up to a glazed duck with caramelized sugar flakes as new feathers. There were 3 wines, sipping whiskey, little bowls of anything you could think of, and all of it served with a skilled staff. In the corner, a small group of musicians played softly. The entire air of the room was of wealth. To Oren, it was cold and reminded him of his childhood. Jamie savored every bite, admired every bit of the hall, and soaked it in almost as if he could not imagine it real. Orion realized that he had never taken Jamie anywhere of the sort, and the wages they had were far from being able to ever afford this place. They had been to fine cathedrals, but nothing of the wealth of the political power of Pert. The meal took several hours, as Orion expected. The bill was brought in a neat small folder, and as he had in the jeweler's, he signed his name and burned his print. The man looked at it twice, then cleared his throat.
Are you the real Orion Hennon? You really Father Orion?
Yes, he is,
Jamie said.
It's just that normally bishops don't pay. The church pays for their meals.
This is on the house of ShaHaNon, not the church.
Orion said. The young man bowed and left them for the back.
It would explain why so many of the church members here are so fat,
Jamie said, picking at a plate of shrimp he just couldn't finish. As Orion finished the last of his wine and the time to go had come, the young man returned. He held out the bill.
Father, the owner said to give this back. As a bishop, you need not pay.
Orion looked at the young man a long moment. He took the folder as well as the pen and wrote on it before he handed it back.
Good night, young man,
he said before he turned to go. The waiter opened the folder and looked at it with a stunned expression. Jamie left with his partner and didn't ask until they were in the carriage.
What did you write?
I left it as a tip for the staff to divide.
Why?
Jamie asked.
I will not take handouts from a church that allows such darkness to walk the streets. We ate there as members of the house of ShaHaNon, and that is how we paid for it.
He glanced at his partner, then back out the window. They rode in silence through the city, not back to the inn, but up toward the higher end and the theater.
You have never said I was member of the house of ShaHaNon,
Jamie said.
You and I are more deeply bound together than any marriage might make two people. My life is your life, and your death is my death. If you wish to live like a ShaHaNon, then that is your choice. God knows I will never have a wife or children, so I might as well give it to you.
Orion, if we live through the next 20 years, we are going to live a very long time. You might yet be king of Valrine before you die.
Ha ha ha.
Orion laughed and looked at his friend.
I'd rather die,
he said, shaking his head.
Besides, the crown has left my family. At most, I might end up an earl after my grandfather, but even that is not likely. Jerome has chosen his king for Valrine, and no one from the von Valrine line will ever get it back.
He changed the topic.
If you read the small legal print in the ordination and the laws concerning estate between soul-bonded priests, property becomes joint in the same way as someone marrying into a royal family. You just never seemed interested.
I don't know how that works,
Jamie admitted.
You can draw on the family common bank to a certain amount, and if the spouse dies, you inherit an equal share that is split between you and any children. The name is retained for the children and the widow. If a marriage has lasted 50 years, there can be a signing of names. In that action, you become equal owners of the personal wealth and property.
He rubbed at his hands. They ached today, and his priest ring seemed to burn as if he had gotten nettles under it.
I signed your name to my will decades ago. I just never had you add your print to it. It was sort of done to make my father disown me, but my grandfather forbade him to do so and granted the legal right that allowed the signing.
I'm confused,
Jamie said.
You tried to get disowned. Why would sharing your money with me make your father disown you?
Orion chuckled to himself a little.
My father thinks we are married. He always has. He does not understand what the bond is. He thinks of it as a way for men who are that way to get away with it. He hates me. He hates you for making me a freak, and he can't give the estate to his other sons as long as I am alive.
Why?
I'm the eldest son. I get the family estate by German law.
Even if you have no heirs?
Even if. I can adopt my brother's children if I like, but I get it one way or another. I tried to get renounced, disowned, renamed. My grandfather will not do it and thinks it funny that his daughter's husband thinks of the estate as his. So, if I die, you become Lord ShaHaNon after my grandfather. Because of the change of laws, daughters rarely inherit if there is a male heir, and my mother is not high on my grandfather's list of people he cares for. He would rather burn it to the ground than give it to his daughter or her husband.
Orion chuckled.
You getting the name and estate would really chafe my brother's asses to no end. It's almost worth death to make it happen.
Why didn't you tell me that?
I don't like that world, Jamie. I certainly don't like how the laws work now. Before Jerome put new laws in place, the family estates would have passed to whomever the emperor chose of the line. Not necessarily me or one of my brothers, but that's not the way it is now. I have been trying to get kicked out of all that since I can recall. But it would have seemed a rather cruel trick to give it to you just to have it taken away. You have enough magics through the bond to burn a print. We just need to add it to the seal next time we are in a Valrine bank. I just realized that in the, 70 years we have been together, You have never gotten to take advantage of having to deal with me.
You know I'm a wizard because of you. More powerful than most born with it. I'm a better fighter, I'm still alive, and I have a brother. Not bad benefits, if you ask me.
Orion dropped it and let it be as they arrived at the great theater. The sheer wealth in the outdoor tile alone was enough to make Orion clench his teeth. So many people were starving, and the aristocracy was laying tiles that could each feed a family for a year. It made the king's hall seem small in comparison. Orion had to choke down anger at the state of Pert and what had become of its lords. They walked up a set of wide steps to a great covered park with fountains and raised gardens holding flowers, vines, and trees. The way it was stacked and layered was very much in the manner of the elven empires. The nobles and wealthy of the city gathered in the light of the wizard lamps that burned bright and clean here, not the oil and soot-spewing lamps of the lower city. The court wore bright, bold colors with as many jewel-encrusted and sparkling decorations and trinkets as they could find a place to pin, clip, or stick one. Servants moved through the crowd with trays of drinks and candies. The talk made a babble of sound that was punctuated with laughter now and then. Jamie walked next to Orion, taking it all in. Security dressed as nobles with swords met them and took the tickets from Orion.
Names,
A thin man with heavy glasses asked them.
Orion Valrine Henan
Orion said with a heavy sigh.
and Tihamel Rochelle Shazma.
He said. The man recorded it, then looked up at them, blinking.
Orion and James?
He asked.
So it would seem.
Orion said.
Welcome to Broston.
The man said with a nod and a truly pleased smile.
Please enjoy the show.
He bowed and let them pass. They had not even made it to the door when they were met by a woman with a very low-cut dress, a bit too much human blood to pull off old age well, and far too much perfume.
Orion?
She asked, a bit shocked.
My good heavens, boy, I have not seen you since you were a teenager. How is it my own nephew can be in the city and not come to call?
Orion took the offered hand with clear tension and unhappiness, but he forced a civil expression for Jamie's sake.
Forgive me, I lose track of where everyone is. I have been out of touch.
Oh, yes. I do not understand how it is you stand the forest, but I hear you have been made a bishop and given a city of your own. It's well due. A Henan has no place in the dirt.
Kos is not a city.
Orion said.
It is a form of house arrest for a man who tends to be difficult to deal with.
Well, then you must be glad to be out and about.
She took his arm in hers and stepped into a walk with them to get inside.
How is your father?
The same as always.
And your mother?
She does not write me.
They stepped inside the door before she seemed to see Jamie for the first time. She looked him over a bit critically.
You must be Jamie,
she said, offering her hand. Jamie took it and lifted it to kiss the old hand with his eyes on hers. His charm was turned on, as well as a hint of healer's magic that he played with, just enough to make his touch most pleasant. She seemed a bit startled by it, but certainly did not pull away from him.
A pleasure,
He said to her.
Will you be sitting near us?
He asked. She shifted a little, suddenly uneasy.
Ah, no.
She said, then giggled and pulled her hand away.
I have seen the show a few times and have decided to leave the best seats for those who have not. If I had known my own family would be here tonight, I might well have bought us a balcony. But alas,
She looked to Orion.
you should have called. Oh, can you excuse me?
She said, quickly hurrying away.
What did you do to her?
Orion asked.
Nothing.
Jamie said innocently, but laughed a little.
Your aunt? I didn't know you had one.
She is my father's stepsister. I have no blood in common with her at all. And the last time she was in Valrine, my grandfather threatened to beat her into mash for his dogs to lick up off the floor.
That's a bit extreme.
Jamie said, folding his hands behind his back, as they walked through the crowd toward the staircase that would take them to the upper levels.
She hit me with a poleaxe and then kicked his dog. He was a bit drunk and lost his temper. I tell you what, that is one man I would not want mad at me, not even now.
She hit you with a poleaxe. Why?
I was a weird child. I got hit a lot.
Orion said with a shrug.
People didn't like me much.
Why did she hit you?
Jamie asked, very concerned.
I stood up for my father. I told her that at least my father had enough intelligence to fake being a Henan. She, on the other hand, wasn't even worthy of working in the sewer lines, or something along that line. I think I had just gotten home on some vacation or other and was not in the mental space to be picked on by her.
Your grandfather didn't care too much for you being hit then?
He cared that day.
How old were you?
Oh, 13, I suppose, maybe 14.
About the time you started to grow and lose a little of the weight.
Jamie remembered.
I suppose I was slow enough then that I didn't block the blow and she broke my glasses.
Jamie sighed heavily, but didn't say anything more. They brushed through the crowd to get into the balcony seat. It was just 2 chairs with a small table already set with wine and glasses, cheese and crackers, and a bowl of fruit. Orion took a seat and let Jamie pour the wine. He ran his fingers around the rims of the glasses to make certain they were free of any poison, a trick Orion had noticed, but wasn't sure just when Jamie had started to do it. Taking a seat, Jamie looked down at the great stage.
You ever wonder what sort of man you'd be if you had not gone to the seminary?
I'd be dead. I'd have killed myself long before I made manhood,
Orion said seriously. He swirled his wine and took a sip.
I wonder what sort of man I might be if the abbot had not put us together. But then again, I'm pretty sure I'd be dead that way as well. I was far too reckless as a young man. If I had not had a skilled healer with me at all times, I would have died.
You know, I think about it.
Jamie sat watching the crowd fill in below, each to their assigned seats and places.
You have no idea how hard it was to find the money to pay tuition.
You're right, I don't know. I have no idea what financial lack is like. I have always had the money to get what I needed or wanted. Money does not buy sanity, nor does it buy you friends.
The lights began to dim, and the crowd filled the last few seats below. Jamie refilled their glasses and settled in. The play began with a simple melody of a young woman seeking to escape her small village. Orion didn't watch much, and he didn't follow the story. He tried to relax, but his hand burned, his heart ached, his mind was filled with 1,000 things, and kept going back to that flash of darkness he had seen. He noticed through it all that Jamie had a small cough. His mind surfaced out of his own turmoil to watch, and, sure enough, every few minutes the man stifled a small dry cough. Jamie seemed not to notice as he sat forward watching the performance. The intermission brought up the lights, and behind the curtains, a grand change of scene. Jamie leaned back and hit his chest a few times, thumping himself with a hint of energy that Orion could just barely feel, but knew was used.
You really made me part of the House of ShaHaNon. When?
30 years ago or so,
Orion replied.
I thought 30 years ago that we were pretty close. Didn't do anything without talking about it.
I'm not a talker, Jamie. I told you I wasn't going to wave it in front of you to have it taken away. Does it matter?
I guess. I just thought I knew us better than that. I thought all our secrets were from before the bond was made.
It wasn't a secret, Jamie. Money does not spend in the forests of Norwood. It just slipped my mind. I don't talk about my family. You know that.
Do you have any idea how upset I was when you vanished?
Jamie.
Orion leaned forward on the table and looked at him very seriously.
I admit we need to talk, but here and now is not the place. I am sure it bothers me as much as you, but this is not the time.
Jamie shifted uneasily, but eventually looked away from his partner, back to the stage below and the crowd that moved about it.
Something is about to shift, Orion. I think we need to fix this before it blows up in our faces and destroys us both. You are going to have to listen to me and hear what I have to say, and soon. This is killing me.
Orion was about to ask what that meant exactly, but the lights began to dim and the crowd to hush. He tried to watch the play but had lost too much of it in the beginning to know what was going on, and ignored it for his own worry and thoughts. The wine was gone well before the end of the show, but they had places to be. Without saying a word, they left at once, slipping out of the bright, wealthy crowd for the carriage to escape. Inside the carriage were long cloaks with which to hide their finery. They changed carriages twice, then walked. Orion had studied the maps, and it was time to take a look at why they were there.